Welcome to this edition of my podcast and this video on YouTube. If you're joining me for the first time, I talk to people about business and about management and leadership to try to help existing managers and aspiring managers be better. And by the way, if you haven't already done so, you might want to go ahead and hit like and subscribe to the channel. That way YouTube knows there's good content and you'll get notified when I do a new broadcast. So with me today, I have Tom Corner, who is a motivational speaker, mentor, and the author of several books, including an upcoming book about the disconnect in the corporate environment. Tom, welcome to the show. Can you give us a little bit of your background?
Yes, Ken, thank you for the honor. It's great to be here to speak with you and your listeners. Again, my name's Tom Corner. I am based outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. As Ken mentioned, I've written a handful of books, really about mindset, life's journey, overcoming challenges, whether they're maybe an illness or a mindset challenge. And my upcoming book entitled Antagonists to Angels, I kept the title clean. Antagonist you can replace with another word, but it's attention getting for a reason, because there is a disconnect in the workplace. So it's Antagonist to Angels, a change of mind in the workplace and world. And I've spent 20 years in the financial services industry, working for some of the nation's biggest insurers and investment companies, calling on C-level executives down to salespeople and sales desks. And prior to that, I spent a number of years in the restaurant and hospitality industry. And I've always been in a position, Ken, where I'm able to be engaged with people, to influence people, to make their lives better, maybe for a moment or for a lifetime, whether it was providing a meal or planning a wedding for somebody, or with financial services, just helping them navigate their financial future and allow them to earn and protect their hard-earned money for a comfortable retirement, and just leading the people around me. And I write my books so that I can become better. Selfishly, it's cathartic for me and very therapeutic, but it's also something to help people become better. Not just myself, but even my kids or anybody else. So thank you. It's great being here.
Well, very nice. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. And one of the statements you make, and I want to ask you about the why behind this, is you say leadership is too often ego-driven. Why is that, and why is that a problem?
Well, I think that's a natural part of pursuing success. And it's not a bad thing, but if ego is all that we have and based ourselves on, it can become detrimental or quite toxic. And I've studied this myself personally throughout my career. I've read books, research studies. The Wisdom of Failure is a fantastic book on why successful businesses fail. And a lot of times the ego can get in the way. And one thing I would have people think about, and I believe that we need to redefine how we lead in the workplace. And especially, this was before the pandemic. So especially in light of the pandemic, Albert Einstein, and I mentioned this in my upcoming book, I believe Albert Einstein, almost 100 years ago, said, and I'll keep it clean, Ken, he said, forget success. Forget success. But what he said in 1922 was, a quiet and modest life brings more joy than a pursuit of success bound with constant unrest. A quiet and modest life brings more joy than a pursuit of success bound with constant unrest. If you listen to what he's saying, Albert Einstein was obviously very successful, but if you listen to what he's saying, I believe in his intelligence and eloquence. In 1922, he said, forget success. And that was written down apparently on hotel stationery at the Imperial Tokyo Hotel while he was on tour. A courier delivered something to him. He didn't have any money to tip him. So he wrote that line down apparently, and also wrote, where there's a will, there's a way. Of course, those words apparently also sold for over $1.5 million at an auction in about, I think it was 2017. But if you listen to his words and you look up our definition of success, the definition of success is all about ego. It's about titles, it's about accolades, it's about money, it's about things. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, Ken, but if that's all it is, that could be a recipe for disaster. And there's nowhere in the definition of success, if your listeners Google it and look up the definition of success anywhere, there's no mention of calm, modest, or joy. And for people pursuing success, and especially people in positions of leadership, you have to embrace some form of happiness or joy or being humble. So that's a long answer to your question, but ego is not a bad thing. But if that's all we hang our hat on, it could be somewhat problematic.
Yes, and it's interesting. And as I do consulting and I talk to people, I run into individuals that are leaders in organizations, and their minds are closed because if it's not their idea, it can't be any good. And I think that's an example of what you're talking about is that the ego is getting in their way.
Yes.
So do me a favor and tell me what happens to an employee's mindset when leaders browbeat or reprimand them.
And again, we're talking about leadership, but this can also speak to leadership on so many levels. If you're a coach, if you're a parent, browbeating is a harsh term. Browbeating works in the short term. If you need someone to get something done yesterday, browbeating very well works. It does. But if that's all you know as a leader or a manager, that will eventually fail you, and your people will become silent, and they will end up going to work to collect a paycheck, which a lot of people do. More people do than I would like to admit. They go to work to collect a paycheck because they're disengaged or actively disengaged. And it also is something that I believe is a cultural thing. It very well may be a generational thing. If that's how you're taught to quote unquote motivate people, by browbeating them, and that's the only way you know how to motivate them, you will lose your people. You will lose the respect to them. And that's when that happens, your productivity goes down, and you're in effect, you're losing revenue. Money's being thrown out the window because you haven't been able to hold your people's focus to keep them engaged. And that's where the love part comes in, to love your people, to be able to lead with love, to make them better personally and professionally. And that will increase productivity. But browbeating, and I see it all over the place, people don't hit their numbers. They don't check the box on the activities they're supposed to do. Too many managers, which I call mindless management, they browbeat versus saying, hey, okay, well, where's the disconnect? How can we improve this? How can we become better? How can we listen to our people to improve the process?
Yeah, and that is such a key factor. In fact, in the service management class I teach, one of the things I talk about is the need to not look for the bad in your people, but look for the good. Find out what they did right and commend them for that. There'll be times you'll have to give them a redirection and help them understand how they could do better. But I tell them that even then, that what they should do is make that like an Oreo sandwich, where you have good on one side, a little bit of redirect in the middle, and then some good on the other side. So that when somebody has to have their thinking adjusted, they walk out feeling good about the company, and they feel good about themselves because you've expressed confidence. They'll do better next time. So, and I love this. You said that as a leader, you should lead with love. How can leaders do that? How can leaders or supervisors or managers, owners lead with love?
Well, I believe that's an awareness thing. People have to be aware of how they manage or lead people. That's something that's not taught in the schools or universities is how to lead with love. They teach you business, which is great. Business is amazing. I love business, being successful, but that's not taught on how to love your people. So it's a matter of it. If you think about, okay, I have a business. I built my business on a vision of something that I wanted to happen that maybe was a positive influence. I wanted to make money, or I wanted to impact people. I create guiding principles. That guiding principles for most companies are built on the foundation of love. If I want honesty and transparency and integrity and inclusion, that's really from a vantage point of love. So leaders intend to lead with love, but what happens, and I'm not the only one saying this, and I'm not the only one that experienced this firsthand, is if I have a team of 10 people, it's easier for me to lead with love because I have 10 people, they get the message, I'll bring them on board, and we'll do that. But as you grow and you have 1,000 employees, 10,000 employees, that's where it somewhat gets lost in translation. That leader still might want to lead with love, and people come in a management position, and maybe they just want to be a manager and they don't know how to lead, and they're looking at browbeating or spreadsheet coaching, and they're not able to lead with love. And most people don't, because it sounds kind of mushy and vulnerable and weak. But our true strength resides in our ability to love one another. And as a leader, and again, this was all happening pre-pandemic. During the pandemic, we absolutely have to look at how we can learn to love our people. And as you said earlier, okay, focus on the positives. What are what I call their super strengths or their superpowers? Because everybody has a superpower, and they also have something or traits that aren't that great. So why not elevate their superpowers? And if somebody doesn't have that strength, where they might have a different strength, they can work off of one another. But a real leader has to identify that, right? We use our numbers and our analytics to track the bottom line, to track the activity, to make sure we're making money so we can keep our doors open. And that's a delicate balance. And that's where it's a challenge, because I'm focusing on the bottom line. I'm focusing on the black and white. I need to make sure we hit our numbers so that we're successful. And again, the Challenger Sale is a book that talks about the sales process, and they mentioned spreadsheet coaching. Spreadsheet coaching is not a good thing. When you're spreadsheet coaching and you have your head in the numbers too much and you're not looking up and looking at your people and listening, you lose them. So it really is an awareness. And with the pandemic, I see this becoming something that's even more imperative than before for leaders to wake up and really pay attention to their people.
Okay. Yeah. And, I love the term servant leadership. And that's one of the things I try to get the people in my training classes to think about is how can I help this person get better? It's not, what am I going to beat them into doing, but how can I help them improve? What is it they need to become a better at what I want them to do? Because in most cases, and I won't say there's never a case where you've got an employee that's not like that is not a poor employee, because there are some, but in most cases, people want to do good in their job. They want to be successful. And so it's as a leader, that's what you want to do, is help them learn how to be successful. They just probably don't know what it is they need to know. It's kind of the approach I like to take and try to encourage managers to take. Okay. So do you think we're going to be more sensitive to workers because of COVID? Do you think that's going to be maybe bring about some positive ways of looking at things going forward?
I think that has yet to be determined, because we're still not fully out of it yet. But there's been some research talking about, yes, I believe that this leaders need to be more aware of their people, because the entire work experience has changed practically overnight. And it's very easy for someone to focus more on the spreadsheet coaching and the analytics, because if I don't have people coming into the office, it's easier for me just to say, okay, are they logged into Zoom? Did they do the calls that we asked them to do? So going down that path with what the pandemic has done, technology is a blessing and a curse at the same time. And you very well could lose those people. And there's been recent research saying that they expect actually unemployment to go up, or people to leave their jobs once things change. So you have to ask yourself why, because you think maybe the dream did come true, that people are working from home, they're working remotely, which maybe they wanted to, and they're not going into an office. So why would they want to leave their job when things return to normal? It's either a matter of, okay, burnout even more than before, because of Zoom and technology, you know where your people are even more than before. They're at their home, in their office, in this one room where they know that they're going to be logged on all day long. And if you need to contact them, that's where they're at. It's easier to reach them. So maybe the burnout's even higher. But also what this is giving too is people to step back, I believe, and say, wow, to reflect and say, maybe my values have been off all along. I've been browbeaten by a leader, and the pandemic allowed me to stay home more around my family, and values might be changing, where people say, I need to spend time with my family because I've missed it all those years. So there's this dynamic that, again, is, I think, in the process of happening. And for somebody in position of management and leadership, the sad thing is there are businesses that no longer exist because of what happened. And if that's the case, are you appreciative of the people that you have, or are you somebody who says, well, you're replaceable, I can get somebody else? I've never been a fan of that. Yes, we're all replaceable, but why not? I value you. Yes, you're replaceable. I don't want to replace you, but I see the value in you as an individual contributor. And if you do the numbers, it costs so much money to replace an employee and hire an employee. Why wouldn't you embrace them more?
Yeah, it's interesting. In the copier service industry, the cost of replacement is so high, and it's funny. I worked for an employer years ago, and they let an employee leave for 10 cents an hour. That's $208 a year. And they let about $60,000 worth of training walk out the door for $208 a year. So what's the ROI on that decision? But I've literally been in situations where I heard, an owner tell an employee, well, I can just replace you. And I am like, hey, you don't realize how stupid that is as a thought process, and you have no idea the dollar value that's involved. It's kind of interesting. Most of the managers that I work with, I make them calculate what it costs them to train a person up, to make them, a qualified worker. And most of them are flabbergasted by the dollar value. Mm-hmm. And I said, now, when you think about your employees and you realize the investment you have in them and how valuable they really are to your company, it will help you understand why you need to take better care of them, and why your goal is always to help them, not replace them. Yeah, it's one of my pet peeves.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get on a soapbox about that. In your upcoming book, you address the many parallels between our childhood on the playground of our life to our adulthood in the boardroom of life. Does the root of this dysfunctional relationship between bosses and employees stem from the anger that leaders and or employees carry from their deep past?
Yes, absolutely. And in my book, I open it up talking about from birth and my experiences on the playground, which are real experiences, but my book's a novel. But if you look at it, Really, not much has changed, Ken, from the days of when I was a fifth or sixth grader on the playground, and knuckleheads would go around and push you around or say stuff or threaten you and get away with it. And even if a teacher called them out on it, they would deny it. It happens. And not much changes from those days to the days of our quote unquote adulthood in the boardroom. It's the parallels are quite striking. It's very similar. And so that goes into what I write about. We become who we are in life based on what we are taught, what we learn, our upbringing. And so if there's a cycle of being a tyrant leader or being, a mindless leader or a self-serving leader, where does that come from? And it's just like parents, and say, okay, well, and I write about this in my book, Barred Eyes and Feet, Finding Enlightenment After Age. Why were my parents or step parents a certain way? Once I understand that that's how they were brought up, instead of becoming angry and saying, well, my boss is a jerk or my parent or teacher's a jerk, if I understand it, then I can accept it more and forgive them. And once I understand that, maybe my approach will totally change. Because if I see that they're a tyrant or they're browbeating me, and I understand that that's the way they were taught, maybe there's a way I can connect with them. But the same thing happens with the leaders too. They need to also awaken and realize that it's just like raising kids. Okay, each kid that I have is different. Like I have 3 daughters and they're all very different, and I can't approach them all the same way. And that's the cookie cutter approach. And companies grow and they follow the cookie cutter approach. And then all these other people fall through the cracks because they're not taking the time to say, well, why did we lose them? We lost these people. Why? And that's a dynamic that leaders have to become aware of. And are they going to say, well, that's collateral damage, we'll just rehire and we know that that expense is built in? Or do you want to spend the time to actually engage these people to make them better personally and professionally, to make your company even more successful? So there's such a parallel between the days of our youth, who we become as an adult, whether we're an employee working for a manager or a leader, or we're that manager or leader with employees under us. And I talk about, Carl Icahn mentions in Tony Robbins' book, Money, Mediocre Management. And he's talking about obviously making a company profitable. Why they're not profitable is because they have mediocre managers in there who are just the popular people who made their way up, but they're awful, awful managers. And so the company's value is stagnant and stuck and stale, and you can't get them out. And that's a reality. They're the people that aren't there to lead, and probably are not willing to learn how to love. Maybe they are, maybe they were taught the wrong way, but it's interesting when you step back and look at yourself as an individual, who you are, who you've become, and how it's been impacted. And if you're stuck, how do you make the change? Are you willing enough to make the change? And maybe when in doing that, you're admitting maybe faults and failures. But to me, that's the sign of a real leader who's strong enough to do that.
I love that comment about it takes a strong leader to admit their faults. I was wrong are probably the 3 hardest words for most people, especially leaders and managers and owners, to say. And sometimes for husbands and wives to say.
Yeah.
We just don't want to be wrong. We don't like being wrong. But we've been conditioned that being wrong is bad. And so we get stuck in those roles. It's kind of interesting in my industry, and this is where I got started, was service managers in particular, were not given training. Somebody just walked up to their best tech, said, congratulations, you're the manager. And that was the end of their training. And then they wonder why the company struggles and why they don't achieve the success they could. But, they wouldn't send a technician out without training him, but they would take a technician that can fix equipment and expect him to fix people with no training. I'm not sure I understand that. Yeah. Okay, so you worked for large corporations. If you were leading one today, what would your approach be to the employees with times as challenging as they are now?
I mean, I think it echoes what we just discussed, is just being aware. And I guess if you're somebody who's not that genuine, who wants to reach out and connect with your employees, they're going to see through it. They're going to see right through it. So that's the challenging part. If you're not there, you can't just, I don't believe you can just come out and say, hey, I love you guys and gals, we're going to make this work. Because I've been there. I've been there at employee meetings and events, and you see a CEO, somebody in leadership get up, and if it's a CEO, they mean it and they believe it. But you have that mediocre management that are not abiding by and embracing what that CEO's, culture and values are. But if they get up there and they say, we're all about this, we love you, want you to become engaged in the workplace, even though we're not here anymore, we're doing it via Zoom, we're still here for you. What happens behind the scenes, and again, I've had people chirp in my ear. They kind of whisper in their other colleagues' ear. They're applauding, and they say, "That's a bunch of garbage. They're full of it. I'm not even buying it." Because why? Because there's a disconnect. Even though that leader absolutely, in their hearts of hearts, believes it, because the people that are in positions of management who are mediocre and are self-serving, they are not taking that baton and carrying it forward. So the people that do the work and put all the numbers up and make the company successful are sitting there saying that's a bunch of garbage. And so, but you can change it, but it takes time. And that's a perfect example. I'm sure that there are meetings where they're saying that right now, and people are at home all over the country and they're talking via Zoom, and we're here to support you. And they feel like they're abandoned on an island, even more than ever before, because they have no connection and they're in their living room or bedroom doing a meeting. So it's just, it's an awakening of sorts. And I believe those leaders have to check their people to make sure they're dialed in, because I went through, this is a sidebar of sorts, but it's similar. I went through a training when I received a higher position in management. I went through a week-long training of management, which was really, really powerful, Ken, really powerful. But I also said it's a bunch of garbage, because I do not see any of upper management embracing any of this teaching, which is very, very valuable. And I asked the head leader who ran human resources, do existing managers take this training? Do they take this, what you're talking about of inclusion and diversity and transparency and honesty? Do they take this training again? Because they've been here for 10 years. And the answer was no. And that's where that you have to come back to the table and say, okay, their values and guiding principles change almost every other year on their website, but the people that are instituting them, they never change. And so they have to bring those people back up to say, all right, are we in check? And so right now in this environment with the pandemic, I don't believe you can just go out and say, hey, we love you more than ever before. It's a matter of just checking the pulse. And I'm not talking about putting out an online survey and saying, how's our employee engagement? Because that doesn't get the full engagement of the employees. You've got to listen.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that brought to mind. I tell people that are doing surveys that they've got to quit asking fluff questions and ask the hard questions. Rather than asking them, are you happy here? Ask them what they would like to see changed in the company. You ask the hard questions. You may get answers that you don't like. You may get uncomfortable answers, but that's how you start to fix the things that are wrong, both internally and externally. Because I usually focus on that in surveying customers. I ask them, what is it you don't like about doing business with us? Because if you knew what every customer didn't like about doing business with, and you could fix that, what would that do to your customer retention? Well, it's the same thing inside. Is once we understand the challenges our employees face and how they try to find out how they really feel about working for the company, how they feel about how they see their manager even. You know, do they see him as a help or a hindrance? You start to get those answers, you can start to say, hey, you know, we've got some challenges we want to fix.
A couple of things on that too. You're right. You need to ask the tough questions. You need to ask the what can I change? But then you also need to follow up with why. Why do you feel the change needs to take place? Here's the other dynamic with that, Ken, is you're spot on, but this was something that I witnessed, my colleagues witnessed, and I talk about it in the book. The main character, Wayne, who was really me, sits down and his manager said exactly that. Hey, what can I do to be better, become better? What do I need to do? He asked that of everybody. And I said names before numbers, because he's very left-brained. He's all about spreadsheet coaching, head down in the spreadsheet, never looking up at the people, didn't understand that connection. And I said names before your numbers. You have to love your names before your numbers. And this gentleman suggested we read the book, The Energy Bus. And I said, The Energy Bus is a fantastic book for adults and kids. I said, what's Energy Bus's rule number 8 in the book? He had no idea. Rule number 8 is love your passengers, love your people. Leaders have to love their people. You have to embrace your people. Now, and the reason I'm saying this is because he asked this question, and this is the disconnect. Great, go out, ask the question how you can be better, the what and the why, but do something with it. Just like surveys, they look at it and they go, okay, great, everybody's happy, or this is what they said, and they go on to the next thing, and they do not act on what such a powerful question that was. That was what we were experiencing. There was no action. It sounds so great. Let's go out, rah, rah, rah. We love you. Let's ask you how we can be better. And then they go on to the next thing and they just let it fall to the floor. So you're spot on, but they have to take ownership of it.
Yeah, I would agree. They have to be willing to act on what they learn. You know, and the challenge is sometimes what they learn, like you said, is not pleasant, not easy to learn, and no, that can't be right. And they, like you said, they just ignore it and they go on about what's going on. So I noticed on your website that your next book is coming out in the summer.
Hopefully in the summer. I keep pushing it out a little bit just because I'm going through different updates through the editorial phase, but the plan is this summer. Yeah.
Plan is this summer. Congratulations on the new book coming. I will put a link to your website, and you have a couple of other books I noticed. So I'll share those on Amazon in the show notes below so that the audience can get in touch with you. Let me ask a question, and I don't know the answer to this, which is a bad way to ask a question. But besides writing, do you help businesses to make progress?
I'm here talking to you and interviewing and participating in numerous podcasts to help businesses and managers become better. The next leg of that would be to engage with those who are interested in learning how to become better and how to lead with love.
Okay. And so going to your website, tomcorner.net will be a good place for them to reach out and to engage you a little further if they're interested.
Yes, would love it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much, Tom. I've enjoyed having you on the show.
You as well, Ken. Appreciate it. Thanks for everything you do.
Oh, you're welcome. And for those of you, again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Hit the like and the notify button. That way you'll get a notification when next week's show comes out. Thanks for watching.